I'm more upset with Greg Biffle. He's the most unprofessional little scaredy cat I've ever seen in my life. He wouldn't even fight me like a man after. He needs a freaking whooping. I'm going to give it to him.
Good day, race fans, and welcome to the Intentional Wreck Podcast, the podcast made by race fans for race fans, from the casuals to the lifelong gearheads. My name is Jeff, and I'm here with my fellow hosts Corey and Finn, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio under the name Intentional Wreck. You can also find us on Twitter under the handle at intwreckpod. That's at INTWRECKPOD. Well, boys, we're officially 2 races in, and at this point, if you were to ask me how it seems like the rest of the season is going to shake out, I'd tell you I don't have a damn clue. So, what do you guys think?
I think Kyle Busch is going to be a problem all year long in that 8 car.
We done messed
That's
up.
fair.
We done messed up, and we made Kyle Busch hungry again. This past weekend's victory, I think it passes him Richard Petty passes Richard Petty for the most consecutive seasons with a win. That certainly adds to Kyle Busch's all-time status. I believe he's going to lead more laps than Jimmy Johnson all-time as well if he hasn't passed him already. He was a Hall of Famer already.
Yeah.
But now he wants 3. Now he wants 3. And I think he can get that 3rd championship, man. He's already punched his ticket and gotten that rust off, and he's looking great in the Chevy.
Yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that 8 looks strong. We'll get into it later, but that 8 looked strong last year, and it looks pretty strong so far this year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't know. I do think there's something interesting to the concept of KFB, Kyle fucking Busch, taking over the king, Richard Petty, and getting records over there. There's just there's a ring to that I find interesting.
Yep. Right. Also,
seeing NASCAR royalty,
yep.
Come down to another level to some of the next generation of the greats that came after.
Right, and Kyle also's got 200 wins plus across all the series. I don't know if that's something you know, Corey, but Kyle's really known for he races the trucks all the time, and he raced the Xfinity series all the time. So he's actually got 200 wins across all of those series. So
that is crazy.
He's a dominant driver. He's always been one of the most talented drivers. I was actually curious to read something over the weekend that he actually likes the car a little bit more snug. He likes the car tight, a la how Jeff Gordon used to drive. Whereas some of the dirt guys like Briscoe and Reddick, and then of course the Jimmy Johnsons, they said that they like their cars a little bit more loose. Very interesting considering how much of a wheelman he is, that he likes the car a little bit more snug. I don't know how to drive a tight race car. I much prefer loose.
No, same.
But there's that. But no, I mean, I think now, considering we've got 2 playoff locks, right, with Kyle Busch and Ricky Stenhouse, let's go ahead and take a look at the standings this week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the standings this week. Just to point out, anybody that's getting into the sport via the podcast, first of all, we appreciate you continuing to grow and learn the sport with us. Big shout out to Jack and his brother in the Discord. You know what? I can't remember. I'll call him Bobby, but his name's not Bobby Dukes. But I just know if I don't also say his name, then they're going to fight and both be mad at me, because I got to listen to them fight yesterday.
That's brothers for you.
But listening to them kind of be really genuinely interested in the sport has been really cool. And for anybody else, if you have any questions about the sport, you know where to find us on Twitter. But just to point out, when it comes to the NASCAR playoffs, a win and in is the situation. So if you win a race, it doesn't matter where you are on the points, I believe, as long as you're top 30, but they may have even changed that, you're going to get into the playoffs. So these points that you see here, you get points for where you finish in the race, you get points for how you finish in stages, you get points for if you lead a lap and things like that. All those things culminate, but at the end of the day, the priority will go to those who wins. And then after all the winners have made playoffs, I think it was 16 spots, the rest get filled out based on the points. So are we surprised to see Ross Chastain at number 1?
Honestly, to take that even a step further, I'm not surprised to see Daniel Suarez where he is either. I mean,
Trackhouse looks great this year.
They got two drivers, and they're both in the top 5 so far. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not surprised about that at all.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think the ones run quick, and he's been. I mean, he's in it every week at this point.
Yeah.
He's going to be a threat just about any. As far as the way he's driven this year, he's got the car that makes it so that he's going to threaten a win. He's going to threaten the top 10 just about every week right now. Sorry, I interrupted you, Finn. What you got?
Oh no, my wife. He came over to say hi, and I was like, "I'm doing the podcast." Can't get away from these girls when it's time to talk NASCAR. No, I mean, one of the things that we said in the opening episode was my statement was I thought Trackhouse would take a step back because I couldn't believe A, how good they were already, and B, couldn't fathom with just how competitive everything is, and it's higher year for everybody to think about these setups that they would continue to be so talented. And Ross is well on his way. I mean, he's gonna get a win. I mean, he's very talented on short tracks or road courses. He's very talented on short tracks. Very talented on a mile and a half or so. I think Ross is a guy, fantasy lineup, you should always be considering Ross Chastain. No surprise to see defending champ there at second. These next two guys, Bowman, obviously, I follow him, but I can't say anybody had him as the only Hendrick car in the top 10. Is that what I'm seeing right here? The only Hendrick car in the top 10. In fact, only him and Chase Elliott make the top 16 in terms of points. Now, granted, 2 weeks, 2 wrecks for Kyle Larson. William Byron has yet to kind of break out this year. And then you have Kevin Harvick, who was pretty much a late entry into the playoffs last year when he got those 2 wins. But outside of that, Stuart Haas severely struggled. They're not exactly breaking down or breaking out of that struggle early, but Kevin Harvick seems to have something going at least, and got him at number 4. So, I mean, obviously Stenhouse really came in and stole a playoff spot this year. Wasn't a car that anybody really expected to be in the playoffs. So, it'll be very interesting going forward if we have a season like last year where we have so many different winners, or a season like the years prior where there's a lot of repeat winners and the playoffs spots really come down to points and consistency.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, if you look, it's pretty rare to look at a, top 15 list of NASCAR point standings and not see the 5.
Right.
At least with the way things have gone over the last few years. And yes, he's wrecked, so you can't really, say too much there. It's just interesting to see, we're a few weeks in now, if you want to count the Clash, and you don't have Kyle Larson, sitting up there in that top 5, top 7, threatening.
I mean, his aside from the wrecks, I mean, I don't think his cars look that good. I mean, you saw at the beginning of Daytona, he was getting, they were moving him around a little bit. Like, not that he hasn't been fast, but like, it doesn't look like it looked last year.
Yeah, Kyle Larson is not a super speedway racer. If there is a one thing where he is a B driver or less, it is super speedway racing. That's just not his style of driving. So that the fact that he was even in the top 10 at that point is something that we would consider a dub. But yeah, I mean, they had the early engine troubles at Fontana this past weekend, and that's not really anything. I wanted to talk about that, and we'll get to that. But one of those things that had they had a practice, probably found out then in practice they had some issues. Go to a backup car, make some adjustments, and then it's a non-issue. So, but I got more
14.
on that. Yeah,
looking at you too, 14.
So speaking of Fontana, now that we've kind of talked about the standings and we've gone over kind of where things sit now and how things have shaken up, let's go over Fontana and go over the actual race and get a recap going.
Well, I want to bring up that I am very happy with what happened, because I was very hype about it going into it all last week. I was like, man, I've been hyping up this show on these kind of races on the podcast. It better be a good race. And I thought it was the epitome of next gen and what NASCAR is, right?
Yeah, you were excited going into
was
this race.
So
you were genuinely hyped, like outside of anything regarding the podcast, outside of just getting together to talk about the race, outside, you were genuinely hyped about that.
I mean, Jeff Gluck is a very famous NASCAR reporter. He always has a poll on Twitter after after every race, and he says, "Is it a good race?" And for
Friend of the pod, Jeff
yeah,
Love.
yeah, big friend of the pod. But he
It's a funny
always
bit, yeah.
always has a poll after every race. Says, "Was this race good? Did you enjoy this race?" And for the longest, we've seen just bad ratings at these mile and a halves, and this one hit the 90%. 90% of people thought that this one was a good race at Auto Club, and it would break the top 3 of all the time he's done the poll for Auto Club. So it didn't beat last year's race, but last year's race did have a late caution, which led to one of those really short run pit run, or short run situations after the caution. All the cars were close together. Obviously, Kyle Busch was able to, after some solid pit strategy and solid outlaps, and was able to kind of break away from Chastain late. But I really enjoyed watching just the fast cars be able to catch and pass people. Very early in the race, Blaney started in like 6th or 7th on a restart, and he was able to run every person down and eventually got up to the leader, or got close to the lead. I think he got up as high as 2nd. And I just remember thinking, I was like, that's what this should be. If you've got the fast car, you should be able to show that and get to the front.
I think it was Truex. Didn't Truex get sent to the back early on and then go from like 35th to like 14th or something like that in one quick? Yeah, it was insane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Trackhouse, though, is looking fantastic. We were just talking about them. Suarez looked good as well. Didn't quite have the car that Ross Chastain had. But, I mean, those cars are flying. But what I do want to bring up is the team that's struggling. There's been one driver at 23XI to finish a race, I believe. Can you guess who that is?
I'm going to screw this up.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was Bubba.
No, it's Travis Pastrana.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Trick question, right? But
right. I was looking at the results and I was like, well, wait a second. But then again, I thought about how things shook out.
Right. I mean, Super Speedway aside, right? I think we were all very high on Tyler Reddick coming in, but it really looks like some of these Toyotas, outside of Hamlin and the Truex early in that race, there wasn't a whole lot of speed. There's not a whole lot of speed from those guys. Obviously, Gibbs has got a learning curve. Bell was unfortunately a part of that major wreck.
Yeah.
After starting on the pole, and then but he didn't qualify, so it's not like he had a fast car coming into the week. He just got the pole because of the rain out. And then Tyler Reddick seems to really, not only did he get wrecked out, but he wasn't exactly moving up the field like some of these other cars are. So it seems like the older guys in the Toyotas are able to make up for some pretty rough setups at the moment. Do we think that's going to continue, or it's just a rough start? I don't know.
No, I don't think it's going to continue. I think that right now you're kind of looking at, you're looking at the way things are shaking up with this year. You're getting guys that, we're no longer at the point where where everybody's completely getting used to the car or anything like that. But at the same time, everybody's still tuning. Everybody's kind of figuring out, and they realize what happened with mile and a halves last year, and recognizing how well they ran and how fast they were, and a lot of those tracks. I feel like maybe they might be focusing more so on that being more the bread and butter, and I think that you may see a stronger showing out of the Toyota cars as we head into Vegas, for example, and through some of the other mile and a halves.
Yeah, they're gonna find it for sure, right? They're not just gonna. Well, also they're not gonna just keep getting wrecked out, right? 23, like you just said it yourself. 23XI has only had Travis Pastrana finish a race, which is insane to say, right? Through 2 races, but
I do
as we move through the season, they'll find it.
And now I do want to say this: Bubba was bad fast. Okay, Bubba's situation did not come from Bubba messing up. Bubba didn't get really wrecked out. If anybody watched the race this weekend, that track is going through it. There was a lot of debris getting up, absolutely tearing the front of these cars up, which I even thought was kind of cool. Like, if we're going 400 miles at 180 miles an hour, I want those cars to kind of they look war torn, they look like old World War II jets coming back from.
Well, and you saw there was one, I forget who it was. They came, maybe it was Byron, came to a stop in his pit.
Oh, it's Bowman,
and he hit the brakes real hard. Oh, was it Bowman?
Yeah, they showed
all the brakes real hard, and all the gravel just shoots out of the front of his car. Right. Well, no wonder it's not running really very well.
Right, and that's what ended up happening to Bubba is all that stuff got into the grill, and the way that these cars are designed, you really can't get in there and clean that out. And as a result, the engine ended up overheating and they had to retire the car. One of the things I'm going to bring up later down the line, Corey, actually, is there used to be a lot of different rules about the grill. I used to be able to throw tape on the grill. So you'll see something later, maybe at a future history lane, not today, because you couldn't see tape on the grill. These cars from the 90s, not with that resolution. But they used to throw tape on the grill, and that allowed you to go quicker because it's less air coming in. You go quicker at risk of obviously overheating. So cool thing there. But one of the things I noticed, and I was a little frustrated because I was talking about it over and over again in the Discord while we were watching the race, and I thought it was super interesting. So, I mean, we were watching the lap. We had one guy with the stream up, and then Jeff had the driver cams up. Martin Truex was probably the best one to watch all day long for the first half of the race. I mean, his was exciting. But then I had the lap times up, and we noticed, I mean, after 15 laps, they were already a second and a half, 2 seconds off the pace from when they started. And I thought, well, that makes sense. It's a big track. They're really getting the most out of these tires, losing a lot of grip. And then after the first pit stop, it said that Chastain and Suarez had taken 2 tires. Now, granted, it had been that little graphic all day long was showing sometimes 2, sometimes 0. And there's no way that those cars took 0 tires in those situations. So I might chalk it up to that. But let's assume that it was correct and that Ross Chastain and Suarez took 2 tires on that pit stop to come out way ahead because they weren't in the top 3 or 4 from what I recall. And then they restarted, and then nobody could run down Chastain. And the only person that even could run down Suarez ended up being Blaney from what I mentioned earlier. I was really interested in the fact that they were able to carry speed with 2 tires. And I was really hoping that maybe a late caution would come out at a time that we would see maybe a team like go and take, and we kind of got that right. And with McDowell trying to stay out and push the fuel window and stuff, but
that was funny,
right? But that was like they were just flying too fast. I think they caught him well before he even was gonna pit. Yeah. So, kind of hoping we see something like that, and I'm hoping that maybe something changes along the line with stages. Hopefully, like the road course stuff is really cool. That maybe we take away stage cautions. Maybe we take away the stage 2 caution, so the whole final part of the race, the final 2/3 of this race ends up being under green unless otherwise stated, so we can see some strategies. But other than that, I felt like it was real solid, real fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
it looked good on TV.
Oh,
That is for certain. It looks, when you see all those cars coming around the turn and
they're fans.
No one's following anyone, right? They're all just going as fast as they can.
Right.
It looks really cool on TV. The Daytona stuff. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it just like, say what you want. They're out there turning left, but boy, you move them around a little bit, they're gonna all wreck on a track like
tons of blocks. Or that's one of the things I've always liked about Fontana and RIP right now is that blocks at Fontana just hit different. Right. You know, like it's one thing when you got 2 lanes. And you got to, jump down a little bit to an inner lane and jump in front of somebody. Well, right. It's another thing when you got to go from lane 5 to lane 1 to try and get in front of somebody.
That's the trick, is that there's so much room that it's like if somebody's faster than you, they're going by you.
Yeah.
They're going to find a way by you.
Right.
And because, the thing's 5 lanes wide, when they start trying to get in front of each other and throw blocks and stuff, it is entertaining to watch for sure.
Draft strategies were a whole different animal too. I mean, just because you watch Daytona and you see the packs and you see the lines and you see everybody trying to get up on everybody's bumper and you're trying to get up behind and everything else. And then you see a track like Fontana and you might see 2 guys, link up and try and make a move. The slingshots were pretty rampant and stuff like that during this race, which was fun to watch. But the whole draft strategy was completely out the window from what we saw last week compared to what we saw at Fontana.
Right. And sometimes you even check up the whole field on a restart and throw a block and cause a 10-car wreck.
Did somebody do that?
I feel like Joey Logano got a little bit of blame. That was, I will say, again, another thing to add to our later down the line when we have an off week, add in a top 5. How about top 5 just nonsense wrecks of all time? This one has to be up there. I don't even know if they got to the green flag and half the field just completely obliterated.
Did you hear what Logano said? Did it?
What did he say?
He said he did that because the restart zone is longer now. And I'm like, dude, come on. You're in the front of the pack and you're a race car driver and You decided to slow down because the restart zone was longer.
Yeah, I don't
You're not
know.
supposed to slow down on the restart. Actually, that's kind of the opposite of
Speed
what
up.
you're supposed to
Well,
do. Yeah.
well, I mean, obviously, from the little racing. I mean, I don't spend too much time up front in iRacing, but if you can you're trying to get that everybody off balance so that you can get the best jump. But I mean, at that rate, he just wrecked the field, which also is indicative of iRacing. So. It is a simulator in many different ways. I had a question given to me from my man, Old Keller at work. He's my residential boomer at work. Who shout out to him. He actually came to work the other day with he had full-on notes of the podcast. He was writing down all the different things that he liked.
And he's playing Fantasy Live with us too, right? I saw that on
I
there.
think he is.
Keller,
I think he is popping in. So shout out to Greg. Greg's question this week to us, again, if anybody has any questions you would like to hear us talk about on the podcast, again, Twitter is the place to find us at intwreckpod. His question this week was, he has said that he is a live or die. He wants shorter races. He thinks that we need to move away from the long 400, 500-mile races. He thinks that because in the past, the reason they used to be so long before is it was almost like endurance. It was all about not only could you be quick for a long time, but could your car last for a long time. And now with today's regulations and enhancements, he believes that the races are that it's irrelevant. It doesn't need to be an endurance race. It could be more of a sprint race. I want to pose the question to you guys first, and I'll give my answer. So, are the races too long? What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the track. Personally, in my opinion, I think it depends on what track you're looking at and depends on the circumstances. I mean, I think there might be something to say about, running a super speedway. You look at Dega, you look at Daytona at 500 miles, and I mean, those are crown jewels. I mean, those are going to have to be long races. To me, the Daytonas, the Talladegas, the Charlottes of the world, like those have to be long races. If in some time we ever get the Brickyard back, again, another 400-mile long race, I could see where it might be interesting to throw a couple of shootout races in during the season as an incentive or something like that, maybe quarter of the way through the season or something like that. You take a track or if you're planning on experimenting with a certain track that you might throw into the season, as a full-fledged race the next year, maybe try a shootout at that race. Right. Go for 150, 200 miles at, this speedway and run something like that, 2 stages and run it shorter and kind of see what it looks like and do that. I don't know about fully changing the entire format. What do you think, Corey?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but didn't Kyle Busch not take the lead in this race until there was 20 laps to go? Am I remembering that right? It was right towards the end of the race.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was quick all race, but it seemed like he wasn't. So, I mean, nobody had him maybe as the top 3 car in that race.
Right, but I think my thing is, yeah, it's endurance, right? But you also have to give the teams a chance to make adjustments throughout the race. And by shortening the race, you reduce the amount of changes that can really be effectively made. So if they don't roll the car off the hauler ready to race, the likelihood that they're going to get it fixed, especially in a situation like this past weekend where they didn't really have that much practice time, it's tough to zero it in. For example, Briscoe this weekend was going around in 35th for 150 laps or something like that. And then right at the very end of the race, they finally got the thing. It seemed like they got it figured out at least a little bit, and he was running around in the mid-teens or something. So I don't know if shortening the race is the answer. I think if you're gonna do that, maybe you take out one of the stage cautions. Like just take out one of the stages altogether and say, okay, I'm gonna have one stage that's the first quarter of the race. The second stage is the second 3/4 of the race, and maybe you do it that way. You kind of do a long race and a shorter race together at the same time. I don't know. Maybe that's an idea.
Yeah. Here's the way I view it. I think that first of all, NASCAR's already kind of addressed that with road course races because getting rid of stage break cautions eliminates long periods of time where we're gonna have 3 to 4 laps on these. It takes almost 10 minutes to do a lap at 60 miles an hour on those. So we're gonna eliminate that on those tracks. And those tracks are already shorter lengthwise, right? They're not really these aren't 400, 500-mile races when we're doing road courses, right? So they're a lot shorter inherently. With how many road courses are on the schedule, I would say normally that would be a moot point because we used to only have like 2 road courses. It used to be Sonoma, Watkins Glen, call it a day. But now, damn near a third of the tracks are road course races. So, whatever. Short tracks, those miles tend to go very, very quick. And I'll keep them where they are. Super speedways, they could be 300 miles. I don't care. Make them 300 miles. Let's cut the fat. All right, like super speedways, 300 miles.
But you can't shorten Daytona. You just can't.
All right, fine. Daytona 500.
Yeah, I was
cool.
Say, like you're gonna run the Daytona 300. Come on,
this year it was the Daytona 527, but
right. I don't know.
Whatever.
I mean, how about with this? We put 500 cars on the track. Now it's the Daytona 500. But super speedways I could do away with because of how long they take. I mean, this year was almost no cautions, right? Almost no cautions until the end, and it was still the longest fucking 500 ever. So incredibly long race. But I will say this, back in, and go back with me in time, Corey, to like 2019, 2020 when COVID hit. And, when we lost a little bit of time, but then we went back racing, with major restrictions, obviously, to practice and qualifying. It was basically you showed up and the first time you fired the car up was when we were getting ready to go green. But we actually did, Corey, they would split up, they make the races a little bit shorter, and we would run tracks back to back. So we ran Pocono like 300 on Saturday, and then we ran a second points paying race at Pocono again the next day.
Full weekends.
Both in Cup Series?
Racing in the same weekend.
Yeah, and they would even race on they raced on like a Wednesday at Charlotte. We'll have to go back and pull the 2019 schedule, but it was like super weird. It was like we do a race on a Sunday and then a race on Wednesday, because what they were trying to do is they were trying to make up the missed time at these tracks. Sure. I would say maybe do that for Pocono. Maybe Pocono now becomes 2 points paying races in that weekend, but you split them. So now it's Pocono 250. So you run a 250 Pocono race on Saturday, run a 250 Pocono race on Sunday, and that allows them to make changes. So you have a very more competitive Pocono race or something like that. Bristol Dirt needs to stay however long it was. It was a perfect race.
Yep.
And the 600 needs to stay how long it is. And another thing, too, is to Greg's point, talking about how the things don't change or it's all about endurance. I'd like to see more races that are a little bit more split day to night. And that's what makes the 600 so good, is you have to have a day setup to be quick in the day. And then when it turns to night and the track cools off, everything changes. But I do think that NASCAR, if you were to do something like that, where we keep the races long, like you mentioned, adjustments, I think we need to I'd like to see them open up the rule book a little bit and allow more adjustments to be made during the race. Because there's a lot of things that can be done between practice to the race that can't be done during the race. I'd like to see those things. But I would say this week was a great example of why 500 miles or 400 miles, a long race is important for a couple reasons. You already mentioned one, which is Kyle Busch didn't have the car to win this race until, 40, 50 laps to go. I think that's perfect.
Endurance race for the pit crew too, as they're making adjustments throughout the day, trying to get stuff right.
Right. And second is there was no practice and no qualifying. So they unloaded and they didn't have an opportunity. If the race is really, really short and you don't have a good car, you don't have all day to figure it out. And that sucks because you didn't get a chance to do anything in practice. And it isn't even like back in the 90s, 2000s, 80s and stuff where we had happy hour. You had like 2.5 hour practice sessions, dude. They'd be like practice 1, 2, happy hour. Like there was so much practice and testing that you could do to nail these setups. Now it's like there's a 45-minute practice and no more qualifying. And they've cut back on that because of cost, and maybe they didn't want to do that as much. But at the result, there's not as much adjustments and things like that. So I think having the long race allows teams to make adjustments, allows them to get the car quick. But yeah, I mean, either way, Greg, thanks for posing the question. There's our thoughts there.
Yeah, it looked like back in the day, it was kind of like it reminded you more so with like F1 practices and even Indy for some of the bigger races, some of the open wheel racing where they'll do multi-day. You can tune into Peacock and you've got 2-3 days of Indy practice, or you can turn on ESPN now and catch a couple days of F1 practice or something like that. Yeah, there used to be a lot more to it.
What if there was a qualifying race? What if you qualified race and it was points
Duels?
paying? It was essentially duels. Yeah, you essentially have one duel on, you have a practice and then you have a duel on Friday or Saturday, and that allows you to figure out a spot without having to do a qualifying setup. You just no hot lap setup. You go out there with the race setup and you go, and then that determines the starting order. Make it 50 laps. You go out there and you run 50 laps as a group, and then from there, it's maybe some kind of points payout in that situation, and then whatever. The only downside is just how do you determine the starting order for that? Make it reverse order of points.
And now we qualify for the qualifying races qualifier.
The 3rd, 7th, and 13th actually make up a 3-wide front row, and then we go back from there.
And if they can't figure it out by then, they'll have a 3-man, one-legged sack race on consecutive Sundays until they figure it out. So moving on from that point, I think it's time we take a second to congratulate Finn for taking a trip to Victory Lane in fantasy this week. So I'll give you a second to, gloat and do whatever you need to do and get this one out of your system before I beat you again next week.
Well, I had an all Chevy lineup. I really wanted to put it to the man, Corey, who spends all his time trashing Chevy. All he wants to do, and just to be clear here, this is you don't get to say it's my victory lane. No comebacks, no takebacks. You got to win next week. So I tried, but Willie B couldn't get it done. I had to sub Logano in before the last stage. But huge shout out to Kyle Busch for winning the race. Eric Jones, he was good last year. Thought he'd be great this year. And then Daniel Suarez, we were talking about Trackhouse later. And of course, third in points, Alex, the showman Bowman, getting it done. So shout out to the team. Hope to be back here next week in Victory Lane. Hopefully all Chevys can get it done this time.
Congrats, by the way, Kyle Davis. I think that's you, Kyle Davis, who won the league for the week. Finn takes the victory lane. Kyle Davis wins the league for the week. So congrats to you both.
Yeah, I didn't win victory lane for the whole league, just us three, but it's all the same.
That's right. We know who really counts, but we don't count.
Well, congratulations to Finn. And now I say we pivot
I have one more thing, okay?
Oh,
I have one more thing, okay? This week's Blaney Blast, okay?
Oh, God.
This man's introducing new segments on the fly.
Blaney Blast, here we go. Murdering a cat. If you can see here, there's a little black speck, top of the screen.
No.
There is a cat on the track, and here's number 12, Ryan Blaney himself. And he does have blood on the front of his car. He definitely hits this cat. And if he doesn't hit it, he almost killed it. And he was aiming for it. So, Ryan Blaney, enemy of all cats in the Intwreck podcast. Cat murderer.
I have to be quiet while he accuses Blaney of murdering cats. All right.
Oh my God.
We have reached a new level of Blaney hate, and we know what victory lane is now, boys.
Well,
Don't
now
let
we
me
know
win.
what
That got dark.
we know what low looks like. All right.
All right. Well,
Oh boy.
no kittens were harmed in the filming of this podcast.
Wow.
Only in Finn's imagination.
Well, I guess there's only one way to go, and that's up now. Let's pivot from that and take a trip down to history lane, which is, my God. People usually like this part. I need to do this part again. I've been thrown off. Holy shit.
This is the best.
Jesus Christ.
Keep it rolling, baby. History
I
lane.
did not need to. Good God.
All right.
So we wanted to do the 1998 Vegas race. It was the first one. Mark Martin won. Wanted to shout out Mark Martin, the best driver of all time with no championships in NASCAR. But that race was.
I watched it and vetoed that.
Can we just lead back into history?
No,
lane?
Jeff. It's staying. It's staying, brother.
This was really bad. And
What's our Jeff Fast Facts? What you got for us?
I got plenty of fast facts. I got a ton. I had cool paint schemes. I had everything else. I had to dig myself out of this hole
What
now.
are your fast facts, man?
Yeah, man.
All right. Oh boy. All right. Back to to Fast Facts. Here we go. So in 1999,
Cat
Las
killer!
Vegas.
Sorry.
Oh my God.
We have broken Jeff.
All right. What do we
Yeah,
got?
can we
No.
try that again?
No, you don't get the.
please?
No, I decide the cuts. I edit in post.
Oh,
All right, I won't interrupt you. I won't interrupt you with cat killer accusations. Whew. Big breather.
okay. I think now is a good time for us to take a trip down the history lane. And let's go back to the 1999 Las Vegas 400. I've got some fast facts about the track for this one. So this was a 400-mile race. It was 267 laps. The race time was 2 hours and 54 minutes. The pole speed was 170.6 miles per hour. The average speed was 137.5 miles per hour. And the attendance was unlisted for some reason. Purse for the race was $3,797,094. First place took home $336,590. Second place, $217,275. Third place took $179,400. Another very interesting fact about this race was the second race of the Winston Noble 5, which was introduced in 1998 after spinning off of the Winston Million that had been run in previous years.
We're going to go into detail on that? Because I've never heard of this before.
Yeah.
So the Winston No Bull was an attempt to reward drivers in the biggest races. Essentially, it was trying to really accentuate the crown jewel tracks. So when you think crown jewel tracks, typically you're thinking of Talladega, Daytona, Indianapolis, Charlotte. And like, so in 98, it was Daytona, it was the Brickyard, it was Coca-Cola 600, the Pepsi Southern 500, and the Winston 500.
Right.
And then in 1999,
it's Darlington.
What's that?
Southern 500 should be Darlington.
Is Darlington?
Yeah, the Winston 500 is Talladega.
Okay.
In 1999, they replaced the Brickyard 400 with the Las Vegas 400, which is one of the things that made 99 significant in this sense. So the premise of the whole thing was any driver who finished top 5 in each of the Noble 5 race qualified for a bonus at the next race. So if your qualified driver went on to win the next Noble 5 race, he won $1 million. And an extra perk to that was they would pick fans at random and assign them to a driver. And if their driver won the million, they'd win $1 million too.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome.
Which is a pretty solid thing. I mean, it's, they essentially take a fan and be like, all right, your guy is Burton, and if he win, since he qualified from last week, if he wins this week, you get $1 million, and so does he. So get out there and root like hell.
That's crazy. That had to be mad expensive for them. Did it hit?
Sure. NASCAR at this time, fucking thriving.
Yes,
thriving in money.
$3.8 million for the purse in this one, and we were going into NASCAR's golden age at that time.
Dude, yeah, I mean, Gordon is the defending champion of this season. Tony Stewart's a rookie. Dale Earnhardt is in his prime. Well, I mean, late prime, but I mean, he's in his, he's killing it. Yeah, there's so much talent, so much money in the sport right now. I mean, you were just talking about some paint schemes that you were talking about. We'll come back to this, but the sponsorship at this time was crazy, right? What are these?
It was fantastic. This is one that I absolutely love. So this also leads me in. So the manufacturers and models, we only had 3 for this race. We had a Ford Taurus, Pontiac Grand Prix, and the Chevy Monte Carlo. This that you're looking at right now, this gorgeous Ford Taurus that you're looking at, was the number 9 WCW NWO Ford Taurus that ran in this race, specifically at Las Vegas. Now, before this, when they did the Daytona 500, ran another paint scheme, the Cartoon Network paint scheme, which all of my millennial friends watching this right now are probably getting hit with a tremendous wave of nostalgia seeing both of those. As we first saw WCW and NWO, and now we usher in Dexter's Lab. We see Dexter yelling at Dee Dee on the back of the car, causing mischief. And I remember some of these old Cartoon Network schemes that they used to run with the checkered and everything else. It was kind of a match made in heaven, but this was an awesome blast from the past I did not expect when I turned this race on. So I thought that was fantastic.
Dude, somebody was sponsored by corn dogs. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
State Fair corn dogs.
State Fair corn dogs was
What was
killer.
what was that one I saw earlier?
Oh
That was
man,
really good.
there were some Interstate Battery ones. There was
this
I
is
saw
a good
Circuit
era.
City car.
This is a good era for paint schemes for sure.
Yeah, well,
Because that right there is like, what's more late '90s than Dexter's Lab and Hulk Hogan? Like, I mean, come on,
right.
like that's priceless. And I gotta say, you don't see any that good anymore. Some of them are good nowadays, but like
we're
not
definitely
that good.
sleeker. It's definitely a sleeker look, but I wouldn't say that there's any sponsorships that I'm just like, yeah, like dude, Mark Martin was like 50 years old, right, driving the Viagra car.
Yeah,
it was
hilarious.
Perfect, but now there's not. I mean, I think there's admirable paint schemes, but for the most part, everybody kind of runs the same. Nobody's breaking down barriers as far as I'm concerned. Maybe Ross Chastain with the watermelon on the side, but we did the paint scheme review at the beginning of the year. I can't remember any of them making us go, this is crazy. No nostalgic.
Everybody's more sponsor aware.
Except
It's
the
more
cheese
PR and
mobile
sponsor aware.
for Stenhouse.
Right. They also
I
do
love
way
that
more
one.
promotionable. Remember like Jimmy Johnson ran like a Madagascar paint scheme, or like it looks like there's less promotion work on like for like one-offs, like maybe a movie coming out. Hell, Dale Jr. racing the Dark Knight Rises Chevy at Michigan and winning with the giant Batman symbol on the hood. Like that was some dope times. I kind of hope we see some of that again.
This was the whole this is part of that inspiration that when you watch Talladega Nights and Ricky Bobby is driving was the Crown Malt liquor car. It's like you were at that time when that movie was coming out towards that tail end of that. And it was, that's the joke, right? That's the whole thing they're nudging you in the ribs with is like, look at this crazy sponsor. As long as anybody pays, they can throw whatever they want on the car.
Right. Right.
Yeah, now it's a lot more PR heavy and, folks are a lot more concerned about making sure because they know that paint scheme is going to be introduced days ahead of time and it's going to be all over social media. Everybody's going to know about it beforehand as opposed to here we are on Sunday and you're driving the Dexter's Lab car, it's a whole thing.
One-off sponsorship, so different. But no, so one of the things I wanted to point out by this race is qualifying was actually done different for the 99 Vegas race. It was split into 2 rounds. The first round was held on Friday in the afternoon. Each driver had 1 lap. So normally in qualifying, you might see 2-lap situations. This one was 1 lap to set a time. During that first round, the top 25 drivers in the round would be guaranteed a starting spot in the race. If a driver was not able to guarantee a spot in the first round, they had an option to scrub their time and try and run a faster lap the second round of qualifying. And then I believe after that 25, everything else was set based on provisionals. So I think like Kyle Petty didn't make this race, and Kyle Petty was kind of a mainstay in NASCAR at least in the late 90s. And I think Dale Earnhardt ended up having to get in on provisional. He didn't really have qualifying speed for this race. So kind of weird. We've also seen group qualifying in NASCAR. Maybe we'll find a race later that had group qualifying where instead of like having like everybody go out, Corey, they used to like everybody goes out and they have to do like it's almost like a practice session, but you just have to get your 1 lap in during that practice session at some point. Right. That was really weird. Testing out different qualifying. So we might have to do if you could design the perfect race, what kind of qualifying? It takes you back to the All-Star races where they required a pit stop, but then they took away the pit lane speed as well. What kind of creative ways?
Weird last year.
Yeah, they got that. They got some weird stuff out there, but that was something for this race. Let's hop into it. You guys want to watch a little bit of it?
Sure. Yeah.
So this was we all watched this one, so no major surprises here. But this was probably the first bit of action. First off, Dale Jarrett, Mustache King. He hasn't aged a day. But one of the things I wanted to know, and they were talking about this at the point, right, is these cars were on complete edge. And Corey, you made a note, right, that these were louder. You just felt significantly louder.
It's just like it's a different pitch than we hear now. It's like they're working way harder.
Right. These cars are on the edge. And what made setup so important during that time and all that testing is because if the track temperature, if it was supposed to be cloudy and overcast, they'd make a setup for that. And then if the sun came out and put some heat on the track, it would completely change up who was fast. Your setup was literally based on, was the sun behind clouds or is it out on the track? And they were talking about how it was supposed to be cloudy and overcast, but it ended up being a really sunny day in Vegas on that day. And a lot of the setups, a lot of guys were really struggling to keep the car straight. And we're over here watching. This is Tony Stewart passing Dale Jarrett in the car right in front of him. Snaps loose, hits the wall.
Bye-bye smoke.
And bye-bye. That is rookie Tony Stewart as well. Another thing here is, I believe they passed the line. So there is a 2-car wreck. I can't remember if it was right here or not, but they actually, they're racing back to the start-finish line. So caution and scoring loops, they weren't a thing for a while. So they're actually racing back to green, which is weird because the cars are freaking sideways at the start-finish line here.
Yeah, it's none of that, let's find out at the moment of impact, when did the light come on?
Right.
Like, when exactly was this? It's get your ass back to the line and we'll figure it out then.
That sounds crazy dangerous.
Right, and that doesn't exist. And I don't know if there's any bad situations of, there being a wreck because of that. But yeah, they just said go, get back to the start finish line. We talked about the No Bull 5. That was one of my notes here. I want to note that this race was dominated by 2 sets of brothers. We had Terry Labonte in the 5 car and his brother Bobby Labonte, who used to drive the 18 that Kyle Busch drove for the longest time. And then also Jeff and Ward Burton, who were the fastest cars of the day. Though huge age gaps in those brothers. I think Jeff was on the Dale Jr.'s podcast, and he had mentioned that Ward is just significantly older than him. I want to go ahead and show.
Look at the damage that Stewart's car takes right there.
Yeah,
I don't crumple like that anymore.
He
got
gets
rocked.
Absolutely creamed. I wanted to show a little bit of some fun racing here. So this is Ward Burton in the Cat car out front. And these guys are just driving, you're right, just engine speed. They're just ripping.
There's the car I was talking about right there.
Hollywood Video.
That Hollywood Video car is awesome.
That's great.
It looks like a Create a car.
So, Finn, Hollywood Video was this thing called a video store. We used to go, before we had Netflix and streaming services, us old folks used to drive to a store and we'd go and rent a movie and we'd bring it back and put it into our VCR, which was a video cassette player.
Is that like Blockbuster? Is that like Redbox?
It's kind of like that, except it's just a little bigger. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's like Redbox if Redbox was a whole building.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you guys are assholes. So, here's something I also want to point out. We ended up having a caution. They all came down the pit. And what I want y'all to notice is the pit stop times, right? So, obviously now in NASCAR, we've got the single lug, which means just there's one central lug nut that they go in, get out, and get the tire on. They had 5 for the longest NASCAR, I'd say, always had 5 lug nuts. One, the 22, they just leave the tire on the side there. But look, he's up 15, 16, 17.1 for the leader. I mean, even when, a couple years ago, laps, I think 12, 13 seconds was what you were expecting out of these. And then, no, this is 19.2. And also, if you look right here, where is it at? Some guy runs out to go get a tire. Let me see if I can find this. I think it was right here as it turns. The tire goes kicking out in the middle and some guy has to run after it. Maybe it wasn't this one. But yeah, there was a situation where tire went flying out, and with all these cars coming, he sprints out. But you see, that's something different, right? Is they leave a tire outside, and then all those guys go back and grab the tire and bring it back in. Something that's a little bit different from then versus now, and the fact that pit stops almost 4 seconds slower. And this was just 1999, right? This isn't, I'm not trying to say people in the 90s and 80s didn't know how to change tires, but very interesting, obviously, technology. The guns are a lot quicker, things like that. So, I
mean, have we at this point in 1999 have we reached the point of pit crew guys being essentially athletes? Have we reached that point yet? Because nowadays you look at some of these dudes and it's like that guy is massive and he could go play in the NFL and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, a good chunk of the crew members in all right, this is the one where the tire goes flying in the middle of pit road. Sorry, I wanted to show that. It'll be right after this 99 passes. Look at this camera angle. Look at this guy way out here.
Yeah, that's not a place you want to be. That's not good.
He is way out there. So got my timestamps wrong. But no, I mean, most of the guys that are on pit crews are former college athletes, former professional athletes, football players. Seem to be like the gas can man. I mean, that thing is full of liquid gas. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that thing is not light. So no, I would say, I would say that they're definitely putting a lot more stock into pit crew times, and different kinds of athletes. Also, in the same vein, we were talking about road courses earlier, and, those used to be things that were considered one-off. They were considered whatever. So most drivers didn't give two shits. And that's why guys like Jeff Gordon had such an advantage, is because he did give a lot of shits about road racing and he learned the craft well. But Dale Sr. and all those other guys, I don't think they gave two shits about road course races because there were only two on the schedule. Now, again, a third of it is. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting how the interest and the importance of an advantage is found by these guys here. All right, here we've got the huge-ass wreck. So here later in the race, about 130 to go, they're riding around. That's Elliott Sadler getting interviewed. You don't recognize him without his long curly hair.
And stunning high definition.
Yeah. I was trying to see if there was anything cool in that low ESPN Classic ESPN ticker to see if there was anything. Oh, there's the wreck.
Oh, my.
Yeah, absolute chaos. And that kind of reminds me of the race this past weekend. And we're going to talk more about the track itself here, but there's a view through this wreck of this Budweiser car. Look at this thing.
Oh my goodness.
That's insanity. And here's our State Fair corn dogs. And he was not so lucky to get through this one. He ended up getting spun. Took some damage.
I love the damage audio that you get here that you don't get in races now. The tire screeches with the extra booms and thuds and stuff like that. You don't quite get as much of that now, and I feel like it'd be better.
Absolutely. But really, in the story of this race, it was very much dominated by the Burton brothers. Wade was very quick early. The 99 had to work through some traffic, but he ended up catching his brother here with about 13 laps to go. Roush was just really dominant at this track early. They just something about, and again, we had mentioned it before, they're now RFK Keselowski's team, but during this time frame, I mean, they've multiple high caliber drivers, multiple championship level drivers. This 99 car, we kind of know it as Carl Edwards' car, but Jeff Burton was there, you're squeezing it in, and this is pretty much the pass for the lead, and that was that. So he would go on to win this race. He was not a part of the five. For our the No
Bull 5 was not won that day.
The No Bull 5 was not won, but Jeff Burton did go on to win the next race because he qualified for the next No Bull by finishing top 5 here. He won the next race, which was the 600, which qualified him for the next one, which he also won, which was the Southern. So
this man took home $2 million in 2 weeks.
And,
and a couple of lucky fans each came away millionaires from that too.
So there's there's your history lane for the day. Again, not exactly anything groundbreaking on this episode, but it was cool to show off some of the paint schemes, some of the racing, and then some of the differences. But that tire on pit road was the weird thing. All the little
that wasn't a penalty? Was those types of things penalties back then? That's just how it was.
Well, that tire rolling out was, I don't know if that technically counted. They probably didn't care, but no, this like them leaving a tire on the side to run around. I think that might have, and I'll go back and do a little bit more research. I didn't do my due diligence, but I think that might have something to do with the number of people allowed over pit lane. And it didn't have enough people. Now what you'll often see is the one guy will go around with 2 tires, and he'll drop one off on the way, and then he'll go change the rear tire, and then the jack man, when he jacks up the car, will then, while the car's jacked, he will then help the front tire changer change that tire. He'll put it in for him, and then when the front tire changer goes back to putting the wheel on, Jack lowers the jack, runs around, and then second half, he's doing his job. So we might need to do a slow-mo breakdown and kind of break down all the moving parts of that. I know that's and shout out to DGM Racing and our buddy Nate. When they took me down to Bristol, I got to meet their crew members, and I think their front tire changer has a really solid Instagram account. So if I see that, I'll link it in the description below. But he provides helmet cam, GoPro of all of the little things. So yeah, how about next week I'll put together something we could break down, some slow-mo overhead things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Deep dive into pit stops. I'm all about it.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. But now we're on to Vegas.
We are officially on to next week. We are officially here for our next race. So now we can lead in and kind of preview what we think is going to happen in Las Vegas as we come up for official week 3. Week 4, technically,
Right.
Official week 3. Our third week of points racing. We go into Vegas. Last year, Alex Bowman wins. Joey Logano wins.
The fall race. Yep.
What do you guys think? What are we looking at here?
Well, one of the things I talked about last week were the lap times compared to Auto Club and back in 2007 to 2019 to now. And one of the things I'm happy to say is that the next gen cars last year were 0.4 faster in the fall, the second race, than they were in the spring. And the spring was about 0.5 faster than 2019. So we're almost a second faster around this track with the next gen car. Obviously more off-throttle time, but one of the new things we wanted to bring out this week, and we're going to go ahead and overlay this, is our man Corey hitting the track himself at Vegas in the next-gen car. So while that's on, Corey, tell us a little bit about, we had you go on a 20-lap run. Tell us about your experience there.
Well, I think I ran 28 because I just got into it and was enjoying myself, so I kept on going. But let me just start by saying 29.7 and 29.3 second lap times is insane. I don't remember what my exact fastest lap time was. I think it was lap 6, and I believe it was somewhere in the like 30.9, 31.1 range, something like that. So these guys are doing it to no one's surprise, about a second and a half faster than I can do.
Well, it's probably everybody, and then you, and then Ryan Blaney. So you're right in the mix in terms of lap times.
Yeah, anytime you want to put me in that 12 to have a go, I'm more than happy to do that. But yeah, what you notice, or at least what I've noticed is, and I don't drive the Cup cars a whole lot, even in iRacing. I'm in a league for Cup cars, but and we're in Vegas this week, but I don't drive them a whole lot. They're super, super powerful. So essentially, when you're coming around a turn, you're trying to stay as low as you can. You're trying to get your foot back on the gas as you're straightening out the wheel. And the nature of doing that is that you're going to wear down your tires. And this track is not banked a whole lot like something like a super speedway would be. So as you're coming around, say turn 2, you're coming out of turn 2, and it's not banked a whole lot, but then it flattens out very quickly. Right. So you have what happens to me at least is, and you'll notice this, Finn, if you can skip ahead at this point in the overlay to like lap 9 or 10, something like that. I start to get loose, right? Which basically means as I'm coming out of the turn, I'm getting my foot onto the gas too fast, and you could seriously just feel it sliding around. Yeah. And I started to, I was laps 4, 5, and 6 is when your tires are like at their absolute peak. That's when they're cherry, right? You're going as fast as you possibly can. By about lap 9 or 10, I started to really feel that car starting to slide a little bit. By lap 20, man, it was all I could do to keep it straight. And there was multiple times later in my little run there, lap 20, 25, and then at the very end, I stopped driving because I ended up just losing it into the grass in the front stretch. Right. So like I'm recording this and I'm going, okay, whatever you do, just don't wreck. We're going to show this on the podcast. You look like an idiot. But so I end up just
don't be a goofus. Don't be a goofus.
Yeah, I was trying to go as fast as I could. Like, granted, I'm the only one on the track, but I was trying. I knew why we were doing this, and I'm like, I'm just going to try to drive the tires off the damn thing, right, and just see how fast I can go, regardless of no saving tires, none of that stuff. And even in the simulator, like, I can't imagine what this must feel like in a real car.
Right.
To be going 150, 160 miles an hour, or whatever, coming out of a turn,
Right.
and then hit the gas and just feel the car start doing this.
Start to slide, and you're thinking
Oh
so
man,
much.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I know you raced it in the trucks, obviously a little bit easier to run there. I would say one of the big things as you're watching here, Corey race, is that this is what we would call a D-shaped oval, right? And that's, like he mentioned, going into 1 and 2, I'd say it's the easier turn. Definitely easy to get slicked. It's the more bank turn out of the two, so definitely easy to get loose, very more slick. But when you're coming off the turn, it really flattens out to a true straightaway. But then when you get into 3 and 4 and you come off 3 and 4, it doesn't hit a true straightaway, but instead it almost continues in an oval, right? It's very, that front stretch is very round, right?
It's a baby.
There's a lot more left-hand wheel turn,
right,
passing the start-finish line than you would expect.
And
So,
that
like, you're
wall sneaks
finishing that lap, and you have to keep it to the left, and
Right.
that wall comes up on you.
that wall sneaks up on you. So that was one of the things that I noticed is I started loose and then I got tight. So and so the car really didn't want to turn in 3 and 4. And when you were watching the race yesterday on the stream, same deal, right? I felt very comfortable. Once those tires were worn, it was a little tight. It was actually very easy to get back on the throttle on 1 and 2. Pretty solid, didn't feel loose. But 3 and 4, it was plowing. And then I'm like, you're thinking, well, I have all this room because it kind of ovals out, a little bit more.
Yeah,
it's a little
but it
bit
comes
wider,
back to you real
and
quick.
you can get up, and then you get real close to that wall, and it's very scary. So, it's a very, very quick track. It's not nearly as big again as Auto Club is, but it is a very quick track. It's very, very fun. There's gonna be a lot of stuff to do. So I'm really, really excited about this one just as much as Auto Club because it looked like, again, they were able to gain 4/10. Granted, the springtime weather versus the fall time weather might be the difference, but it is Vegas. It's kind of similar year round. I didn't quite check, track temperatures and stuff like that. But no, I mean, I'm really excited. I'm wondering if they can even get into the 28s this time around. And if not, at least it's going to be a good race because it was good. Both races were really good last year. So
We're in a good little pocket of racing where everyone's warmed up, right? And they just are throwing these awesome tracks at you one after another, and this is going to be no exception. I mean, if my experience with iRacing in it this week is any indication, there's going to be guys all over the place. It's going to be tight. They're going to be right on top of each other. It's going to be a blast.
There's not quite as many lanes, I'd say. We're really looking at 2 real lanes. If you can find some speed on the outside, you could definitely get some momentum, especially on those restarts. But I don't think we see anybody wall riding this week. I don't quite think that that's where the speed is versus like Auto Club, where if you can get right on the wall and find speed, that works. So definitely more of a 2-lane track here. If they get some rubber up there, maybe we see Reddick up there trying to make something happen. But for the most part, that's what we're going to see at Vegas.
I think the cars like these 1.5 mile tracks too.
Oh yeah.
Like that seems to be their bread and butter so far.
If last year was any indication, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's a good time to lead us into what we think prediction wise and how we think this is going to go this week. So we'll start with you, Finn. What do you think?
Man, I want to say Alex Bowman, but I mean, he's still trying to figure things out. And so while I would say I'm going to put my dark horse as Alex Bowman this week, obviously the guy that won the race last year, but they've got some speed early this year, and I think that Bowman can get it done. As for my favorite this week, I'm going to stay in the Hendrick stable. We're going to go Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott drove from the back all the way up this week, and I think if he had, actually, I don't know if he was quite catching Kyle. But if he hadn't had to deal with as much adversity, having started in the back due to the qualifying being rained out and him having a poor Daytona, I really think Elliott may have won that race. So my favorite's going to be Chase Elliott. Dark horse is going to be my man Bowman.
Elliott was super fast last weekend. He made me eat my words because I called that he was going to do bad, and then he was lights out that entire race.
Yeah. He heard you.
He was
no kidding.
Wicked.
What do you think, Corey?
Wrong. My favorite is I don't like rooting for him, but I'm going to call it this week. I think Ross Chastain's going to run away with this damn thing.
Yeah, he's so quick.
He led the most laps. I was doing a little research in both races at this track last year. So he didn't win either one, but he led 70 plus laps, I think, or 65 plus laps in each of the 2 races last year. And I think he's been quick. He's at the top of the leaderboard, and I held my tongue earlier as we were talking about it. Kind of looking at the leaderboard for the point standings for the Cup Series, and I think Chastain's going to have a very, very good day. My dark horse, I think you guys tell me if you give me this one as a dark horse. Kevin Harvick. Is that dark horsey enough?
It's fair enough.
Okay.
Oh, I think he's got. I mean, Kevin Harvick's got some of the best stats at Vegas historically.
Right.
So a very strong track for him. I would say a dark horse in that Stewart Haas is struggling. And I don't think they're going to be favored by any as the Fords to be. In fact, right now the Fords to be are going to be the Penske boys, Logano, and then RFK. I mean, Keselowski looks great. Buescher's top 10 in points. He looked fast. He ended up finishing. If you guys didn't
give me Kevin Harvick as a dark horse, I was going to ask if I could get Keselowski as a dark horse.
I mean, yeah,
Damn it.
Couple, is that your dark horse there, Jeff?
Yes.
All right, we'll elaborate.
But I'll take Harvick. I will take Harvick.
So you can give your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you do that. You take Harvick as yours because I have a contradiction to do. I'm going to do a contradiction here. For my race winner prediction, I'm going to contradict my early season prediction about Byron being the first Hendrick winner, and I'm going to predict Kyle Larson to win this race.
Fuck, I thought I was going to say Bowman.
I think it's going to be Kyle Larson. I mean, Kyle Larson traditionally races well at Vegas.
Yep.
He is good at this track, and after the last couple of weeks, I think we really have to watch out for the 5 because I think he's ready. You can never count this guy out. It's, he's somebody that you always have to keep an eye out in your rear view, or he's going to blow right past you. And no matter how far you knock him back, he'll find his way up to the front. And Vegas is traditionally a track that he does well and knows how to find the top 5. So I think Kyle Larson I predict him to be the winner. And my dark horse, surprise, I think it's Brad Keselowski. It's one of those things where I think Keselowski has surprised me a little bit. He's raced better over these last couple of weeks than I had initially anticipated him to do.
Right.
And Vegas is also another track where I think he runs pretty well. So those are my 2. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw them both in the top 5 or the top 10 this week.
Yeah, I mean, Buescher's a very talented driver. That program has been, we haven't seen Roush really been good in a long time, so I think we just kind of got used to that. But Trackhouse did it, 23XI did it. They got a win last year, albeit it was in playoffs. RFK could absolutely have a couple playoff spots locked up, so I think that's a good pick for sure.
Y'all saw me, based on the pod predictions from last week, I dropped a couple of bucks on Buescher to win last week just for jollies to see what would happen. And he started creeping up, and I was like, oh my God. Because looking at the odds, he was plus 10,000 to win outright for this past week at Fontana. So it was like, what the hell? You put $1 down, you win $100. Give it a shot, so yeah. So I definitely took a flyer on that one, but yeah, we'll see how things go. I think we've all made some pretty reasonable picks, with this one. I personally, for me, it's Larson. I understand, Finn considering Bowman, but then also staying in the Hendrick train. Because, when you said Hendrick, I thought you were going to say Larson, but you ended up with Elliott, which is just as reasonable a pick there. And, I think Corey, even though you tried to steal my dark horse,
dude, I had
you're
both
pretty locked in.
My backup favorite, if Finn said, I don't even remember who I said now.
He said Harvick and
I said Chastain. I have written down here. My favorite is Chastain. My backup favorite was Kyle Larson.
Yeah.
In case Finn said Chastain. So I had yours nailed.
Just in case.
Your primaries as my backups.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think that's just about all I got. Yeah. So I think we're about ready to take this thing out of here.
Sounds good to me, man.
Yeah. So
with a song.
I think that about wraps things up for us this week. Please make sure you check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio under the name Intentional Wreck. Please like, subscribe, share, and tell your friends. You can also find us on Twitter at INTWRECKPOD. That's at intwreckpod. Find us, follow us, and talk racing with us whenever you want. Also, once this episode ends, since you're already on Spotify, be sure to check out the band responsible for the music you hear throughout the podcast. They're called 4th and 1. Everybody, have a great day and enjoy the race.
Thanks, buddy.
can take what you want from me.